South Sudanese Civil War atrocities. Attacks on civilian centers. The government is accused by the U.S. and aid groups among others of using starvation as a tactic of collection punishment for populations that support rebels by intentionally blocking aid. Adani Wet Adani, president's spokesman told to news conference, claims that rebel troops went into the hospital in the town of Bor last month and slaughtered 126 out of 127 patients. Apparently an elderly man was blind and rebels spared him. On January 31, 2014, in violation of the ceasefire agreement, the signed government troops attacked town of Lear in Unity State, forcing 240 staff and patients of Doctors Without Borders in Lear to flee into the bush. Thousands of civilians have fled to the bush. Doctors Without Borders has lost contact with two-thirds of its staff formerly located in Lear. It is believed that the town was attacked by government troops as it is the home of former Vice President Riek Machar. On 18 April, UN said that at least 58 people were killed and more than 100 others wounded in an attack against one of its bases in South Sudan, sheltering thousands of civilians. On April 17, 2014, 58 people were killed in an attack on the UN base in Bor. 48 of those killed were civilians, while 10 were among the attackers. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon emphasized that any attack on UN peacekeepers constituted a war crime, while the UN Security Council expressed outrage at the attack. In late 2016, in a government attack on Yea, 3 villages were destroyed with 3,000 homes burned in a single village. Ethnic cleansing. There are ethnic undertones to the conflict with the SPLM and SPLA, which have been accused of being dominated by the Dinka. A Dinka lobbying group known as the Jiang Council of Elders is often accused of being behind hardline SPLM policies. While the army used to attract men from across tribes, during the war, the SPLA had largely constituted soldiers from the Dinka stronghold of Bahr el Ghazal, and the army was often referred to within the country as the Dinka Army. Much of the worst atrocities committed are blamed on a group known as Kbeni, Rescue the President, or Mathiang Anywa, Brown Caterpillar, while the SPLA claim that it is just another battalion. Immediately after the alleged coup in 2013, Dinka troops, and particularly Mathiang Anywa, were accused of carrying out pogroms, assisted by guides, in house-to-house searches of Nuer suburbs, while similar door-to-door searches of Nuers were reported in government-held Malakal. About 240 Nuer men were killed at a police station in Jiba's Udel neighborhood. During the fighting in 2016-17 in the Upper Nile region between the SPLA and the SPLA-IO allied Upper Nile faction of Alaini, Shiluk and Wau Shiluk were forced from their homes, and Yasmin Suka, chairwoman of the Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, claimed that the government was engaging in social engineering after it transported 2,000 mostly Dinka people to the abandoned areas. The king of the Shiluk kingdom, Kwango Dak Padiat, claimed his people were at risk of physical and cultural extinction. In the Equatoria region, Dinka soldiers were accused of targeting civilians on ethnic lines against the dozens of ethnic groups among the Equatorians, with much of the atrocities being blamed on Mathiang Anywa. Adama Dieng, the UN's special advisor on the prevention of genocide, warned of genocide after visiting areas of fighting in Yi. Khalid Boutros of the Kober faction as well as officials of the Merle-led Boma state accused the SPLA of aiding attacks by Dinka from Jonglei state against Boma state, and soldiers from Jonglei captured Kachar and Boma in 2017. The SPLM-IO is predominantly Nuer, and its head, Machar, had previously committed the Bor massacre of mostly Dinka civilians in 1991. In 2014, the Bencha massacre occurred when Bencha was recaptured by rebels April 2014 and 200 people were killed in a mosque. Rebels separated the people and picked out those from opposing ethnic groups who they then executed. Child soldiers. Since the conflict began, more than 17,000 children were used in the conflict, with 1,300 recruited in 2016. Sexual violence. Reported incidents of sexual violence rose 60% in 2016, with Mundri in Equatoria's Amadi state being called the epicenter of the problem. A UN survey found that 70% of women who were sheltering in camps had been raped since the beginning of the conflict, with the vast majority of rapists being police and soldiers, and that 80% had witnessed someone else getting sexually assaulted. The SPLA were reported to have recruited militias and young men in Unity State to take back rebel-held areas. They were given guns and their pay was what they could loot and women they could capture, who were raped. Violence against UN and foreign workers. It has been argued that with increased tension with the UN and outside powers over the government's actions, there has been a new shift in violence by the government against foreign peacekeepers, aid workers and diplomats. NGOs are viewed with suspicion, with the Minister of Cabinet Affairs claiming most of the humanitarian agencies are here to spy on the government. During the 2016 Juba clashes, 80 to 100 South Sudanese troops entered the Terrain Hotel facility and gang-raped 5 international aid workers, singling out Americans for abuse, with nearby peacekeepers refusing to help the victims. In July, soldiers ransacked a World Food Program warehouse, stealing enough food to feed 220,000 people for a month, worth about $30 million. In July, a rocket-propelled grenade was fired near a UN peacekeepers' vehicle with 2 Chinese peacekeepers dying after the government refused passage to a clinic 10 miles away. In December 2016, 2 staff members of the Norwegian Refugee Council were expelled from the country without a formal explanation. In the deadliest attack on aid workers, 6 aid workers were killed in an ambush on March 25, 2017, bringing the number of aid workers killed since the start of the war to at least 79. Violence has come from the rebel side as well. On August 26, 2014, a UN Mi-8 cargo helicopter was shot down, killing 3 Russian crew members, and wounding another. This occurred 9 days after rebel commander Peter Gadet threatened to shoot down UN aircraft, which he alleged were transporting government forces.